Hello, and welcome to just a bit of a weird one. I don't know why I'm making this video. I haven't wanted to make my wrap up for June for some reason, and then now that I feel ill today, I've decided late at night that now is the time to have the motivation to do it. So we're going to see how it goes. I could burn out very quickly, but we have 9 books to talk about. I read 9 whole booky books in June. I did finish one off, but it's a pretty fucking strong showing. We have a slight change to the layout now, because here I've now put the books that I have to read for next year's uni course. I'm slowly gathering them up and putting them there. Don't think you're going to be able to read them from here, but if anything pops out to you, let me know your thoughts on them. Oh, I hope I don't keep this in myself struggling. The first book I read this month was one that I was hesitant about because the only reason I really want to read it is to get it out the way. And that is Elantris by Brandon Sanderson. After reading Mistborn and reading Stormlight Archive, part of you is like, that's the best that there is. Like, in my opinion, I know people love Warbreaker. Warbreaker was meh to me. Warbreaker was real meh. And so going into Elantris, I'm like, the guy's first published book, we're going to have his prose issues going on. I'm not sure I'm up for it. And I was really pleasantly surprised by this book in a lot of ways, and then was completely disappointed by another. So the theological discussions, they're one of the best things that Brandon Sanderson does. I think if I'm going to choose the thing that I enjoy the most when I read a Brandon Sanderson book are his discussions around religion. The relationship between people and the Lord Ruler in the first one, the Vorinism and everything, and the relationship between different cultures in Stormlight Archive is my favourite thing. In every single story, my main thing that I root myself in is the exploration of religion, especially Mistborn. Fantastic. And so this has one of the most interesting concepts for a Brandon Sanderson book, which is that there were these ascended people, these Elantrians that lived in this grand city, and people worshipped them. It was this society that their gods, they knew who they were, they existed, and they could talk to them, and they could receive blessings from them. And then all of a sudden, one day, everything changes, and the Sheod happens. And all of these people now, they are cursed, they are these grey creatures, and they lock them into Elantris, and everyone leaves, and they have to basically restart society, and we're following the society that has grown out of those people left. Those that saw their gods fall. We're following 3 main characters in this book. We are following Prince Raoden, who has woken up at the very start of the book. He has been cursed. He has now become an Elantrian, and that basically means that if he stubs his toe, if he gets a cut, that will not heal. That will never go away. He will just continue to develop injuries until his mind eventually breaks with the pain and he goes insane. And so he is thrown into Elantris, and it's him trying to find himself where he fits and how to get these people functioning in some way, trying to understand the curse of the Sheod. We have Serene, who is meant to be married to Raoden. She is a princess of a neighbouring kingdom, and she arrives to find out that her future husband is now not there. And because the contract was signed, the relationship is very much meant to still be in place, and she is a character, fish out of water. Both of them are. They are in a new situation, and she's having to accommodate and get used to a society that is not like her own, and how she fits in. And then finally, we have the most interesting character in the book, which is Hrathen, who is basically like a priest who has come to this place, and is meant to convert the people of Erlon. Otherwise, they will invade and to obliterate everyone. So he is meant to convert these people to his religion, and it is the relationship of all these people as it evolves and as it kind of escalates. It was so good for such a long time. I mean, you had the slight prose issues that if you don't like the prose, it's not for you, but I can look past it. And the theological discussions were so interesting. there were some characters that were weak and others, but Hrathen was so fantastic. And then the third act hit, and I was so let down and so disappointed, because the entire journey and the entire build-up is undercut by unnecessary action. It feels completely out of the blue. It's not out of the blue. It's set up, but it's the most unjustified and unsatisfactory and underwhelming setup that I was so... I went from being like, oh, I can't wait to see where this goes, I'm so interested in this political vying, this religious tension, to, I want this book to end, what the fuck? And so, my big thing about this book is, this is a duology packed into one book. The third act of this book should be its own separate book. It's like the third act is the second book crushed down into minute form. And it's just the case. It is what it is. I still think as it's not a bad book. I gave it 3 stars. I really enjoyed elements of it. Just felt a bit let down at the end. But in terms of the Cosmere, it's still a good book. Then we have the book club book of the month, which is Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. This was picked by Grace. This was very interesting. I actually chose the other book that was suggested, because we do a vote. The person puts forward 2 books, and then we vote for which one we want. And the other one was Sorrowlands by Rither Solomon, and that's what I voted for. So I was partially disappointed when I got Mrs. Death, Mrs. Death. It was rather interesting. The first 50 to 100 pages was a struggle for me. It was really easy to read. The whole point of this book is that we have Mrs. Death, like the embodiment of death. In this is a black woman who is just a bit done, just a bit tired, and she kind of has a relationship with this guy called Wolf, who is a writer, and it's just this relationship between these 2 entities. And their interactions with each other. And so for the first 50 to 100 pages, there was just... It didn't hook me. It was very easy to read. I don't know how to describe it. I can't quite put it into words. I don't want to say cringe, but there were elements that I read it and I was like, I just don't like that sentence. And it was like a visceral reaction, like, I get what you were trying to do, but yeah... Like Palpatine with electric powers. I was like, yeah! Or Bilbo trying to get the ring back. Just, yeah! Nevertheless, there's a point in this book, about 100 pages in, where it talks about death's relationship with time, which is once again an anthropomorphized human embodiment of time, and their relationship together, and how they fuel each other and one can't be without the other, and how life fits into it. And it was really conceptual and experimental and so interesting, and from that point on the tone shifted and the way that the stories were interconnecting really started to work, and I got dragged into it, and I really ended up enjoying the second half of this book. And I think I will come back and read this book at one point to see how I feel about the first half afterwards. I ended up giving this book 4 stars. I think it's like a 3.5, 4 stars. I think the biggest disservice this book has is being called a novel, because this novel is not a novel. It is an amalgamation, it is a compilation basically of all different forms. You've got stage play, you've got poems, you've got like short story formats, you've got all this stuff, all these different forms of writing, and they're all working together from different character perspectives, telling this larger story, but also an incredibly personal story around Wolf. And it was really interesting. The work done around class disparages was incredible in this book as well. There were parts that I really connected to, and there was anger. There was real visceral hatred and anger and frustration and all these feelings that I've felt living in Britain under a fucking Tory government. Selena Godden put it into just the exact words that I wanted to say and I've always felt. And yeah, it's There's a disclaimer at the first start that's kind of like, this isn't trying to make you happy, this isn't trying to make you sad, this is just experience. And that's what it felt like. Like, I felt there were parts that genuinely moved me in a happy way, there were genuine parts that I felt the frustration, the pure unending frustration of living under a disgusting form of society, a disgusting rule. Some of it slapped, some of it didn't work as well. I'm willing to take the bad with the good. I think the good outweighed the bad, and I think it was a worthwhile experience. And I would not have picked it up without the book club. So if you want to join the Discord, feel free. And as a little side note, if you have enjoyed so far or whatever, please do like, please do subscribe. It makes me feel good in my soul. Then we got the chonker. This is the big boy of the month. I finished the Live Ship Traders trilogy. I finished Ship of Destiny. I've been reading this with Grace from Grace Dion, and I've been reading it with Ben from the Discord. It's been now probably a month. Yeah, it's been a month since I've read this, and this will be forever one of my favourite series I've ever read. It was breathtaking. We've talked about it, that this trilogy basically functions as one large story. It very much, each book flows into the next. Sometimes it can feel like you're having the climax of book 2 felt like it was at the start of this. It's very free form in terms of how books start and end. This is perfection, absolute perfection. I don't think anything's going to ever beat the experience I felt reading this. One of the reasons may well be that it was a buddy read, because taking books slow, forcing yourself to take a book slow, like not having that sense of, well, I'll just read a little extra, forcing yourself to have the restraint to dwell and converse with someone each day about what you've read and form ideas. It was such a beautiful experience, and it's hard to talk about because this is the third book. If you've watched the 2 previous months when I read Ship of Magic and Mad Ship, you've heard me talk about how good this is, and this is the same. This is the best book in the trilogy, in my opinion. The work done around the culmination, I was surprised that the way the book was formatted surprised me. Like, things happening that I assumed would be the final act happen midway through. Reunions happen in different places than I was expecting, because it doesn't read like a book. It feels like you are reading just something that happened. This is the closest, for those that talk about the idea of fantasy can't be literary fiction, like that absolute dog shit. Live Ship Traders it's pure art. The construction, the execution, the character work, the world building, the allusions to real life, the messages to take away, oh my god, it's just so good. And I'm going to stop talking about it. It made me cry several times. Everyone should read the Live Ship Traders trilogy. You would not regret it in any way. It is incredible. Next up is an arc I got that is actually now out. The reason I chose this book and requested it is because it is by a very famous author that is attributed as TikTok made me buy this book type jazz. And the description was so out of left field that I was like, okay, you've got me. And that is Vonna by Tessa Mosfeg. I don't have it with me because it was an e-arc, so I'm just going to put a picture up. But this is about a fictional medieval village called Vonna. This is a really fucking dark fairy tale. Disturbing. It disturbed me to the core. I describe this as the best 3-star book I've ever read, because I will read Tessa Mosfeg again. I'm planning on reading My Year of Rest and Relaxation because the prose was electric. It was so readable. There was just such... I don't know how to describe it for this one as well. For this one, there was just a sense of power in the prose. Like, Tessa Mosfeg knew exactly what she was doing with each word and was writing it with such poise and like, yeah, you fucking right, I wrote that. And with such precision that it commanded your attention. I could not take my eyes from the book, but I wanted the book to always be over. That's how I describe this book, because the subject matter is some of the most stomach-churningly disgusting, off-putting, vile material I've ever read. And I think that is impressive in of itself, that someone wrote something that I went, oh, no. Because that does not happen often. I can usually, even if there's one element I'm not quite okay with, I can get around it. This was fucking rancid. The whole story is about the people living in this village. I'm not going to go into specifics about each character, but it's about the power dynamic in this town. It's to do with religion, it's to do with power, it's to do with class disparity again. It's an allegory of COVID-19. It's an allegory of those with power still living life while those without suffer. And so the overall message, got along with, completely understood it, was completely on board. There is just vile, like, trigger warnings for rape, for paedophilia, for just kind of gross out stuff. Some real gross out, disgusting, weird stuff that I don't know whether, like, there were some parts that even felt like they were played for like comedy, but they weren't played for comedy as in they were going to make you laugh, as in they were played for comedy for the characters, and you're viewing it going, for two reasons, because you're honestly grossed out by what's happening, and you're also grossed out by how the characters are reacting. There is a conceited effort to make the audience uncomfortable, and I have to give absolute props for that. And if you can get along with it, then you will love that Vonna. Personally, I wanted to die while reading it. I then finished one that was very lucky, because I read it and then found out I have to study it next year, which is The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. This is the first book of short stories in Sherlock Holmes. So I've read A Study in Scarlet, and now I've read this book of short stories. This was really fun. I gave this 4 stars, I think. Yeah, I gave it 4 stars because it was really fun. Of course, like they are formulaic in the sense of how you approach a Sherlock Holmes short story. So I read it in two parts. I read half of them and then finished it off later. And so, like, the idea is like, oh, you meet the client explains the case, as we go along, picks up clues. Sherlock Holmes knows what's happened but doesn't tell the audience, and then it's revealed, and then it ends. Like, it's all very generic, like, not generic, it's all very formulaic in how he approaches it, because these are magazine stories. They're still extremely fun. They are so much fun, and they really fly all over the place in terms of what we're dealing with. We have a story that is centered around a scam around ginger people, to a character that is involved with the KKK, to a character that has exotic animals to murder for him. We are all over the place in terms of grim reality and absurdist fiction. And it all works so well because you've got these two characters of Watson and Sherlock Holmes centering it all. Because Sherlock Holmes sometimes is an absurd character. Even when he's approaching serious subject matter, he approaches it in such a kind of zany way sometimes that you can have that. You can have the absurd treated seriously and the serious treated absurdly. And it all melds together and congeals into this really nice collection. And Sherlock Holmes is just a lot of fun. If you want to read Sherlock Holmes, I would 100% recommend it. What's next? Oh, Panenka. Panenka by Ronan Hessian is one of my favourite books of the year so far. I am just going to read the actual back of the book. The first thing I'll do is I'll explain what a Panenka is. I'll probably show an example on screen. Panenka is when you're taking a penalty in football or soccer, however you want to pronounce it, and you run up, and rather than hitting the ball to either side, you chip it down the middle. It is a very show-off tactic. It is to kind of swing your dick at someone, just to be like, I did that to you. I've done that to all of you. It's a very big show-off attitude. And so this is, Panenka is the name of a person. So it's Panenka has spent 25 years living with the disastrous mistakes of his past, which have made him an exile in his hometown and cost him his dearest relationships. Now aged 50, Panenka begins to rebuild an improvised family life with his estranged daughter and his 7-year-old son. Her 7-year-old son, sorry. But at night, Panenka suffers crippling headaches that he calls his Iron Mask. Faced with losing everything, he meets Esther, a woman who has come to live in town to escape her own disappointments. Together they find resonance in each other's experiences and learn new ways to let love into their broken lives. This is an Irish author. The story takes place in a fictional place called Seneca. I don't know how to pronounce it. I know that Seneca is a philosopher. It's like Stoicism. Like it makes sense why it's in this book, because we are following Stoic characters. We are following people who are hiding their true emotions from those around them, and this was one of the most brilliant things I've read all year. A new favourite book by far. People say that his other book is better, which terrifies me because this got me. And so, yeah, Panenka, he plays for the local football team. He did play for the local football team. This is a big football team culture, like place. People, it's a local team. Even though it's a big team, they recruit locally. Those that play are local celebrities. And so this deals with being an ordinary person, but in a spotlight in this community. And when he makes a mistake, the place turns on him. And we watch him in the position of 25 years later, still suffering with having to play a role that he now fits in society. That people think they know who he is based on what he's done. And we're following his daughter, who is having to also live in the idea of her growing up in the shadow of what happened. Her relationship with him is different based on what happened. People treat him differently when they her differently when they find out what happened. It's really well done, and for someone who grew up in a town where football was everything, and my childhood was playing football. That's all I ever did. All I did was watch football, play FIFA, go and play football in the local park. That is everything that mattered to me. Automatically connects to this. Stoicism. Because in football, in being a masculine concept in terms of like how it's viewed in society, it's very much viewed as like, well, when men go play football type thing. Stoicism makes sense because it's just what football dudes do. It's bottle your emotions down, just push it deep down and get on with life. So that also makes sense. It all wraps together so well. Just moving prose. The reason I'm going to explain why I love this prose so much. This is one that I can explain why I love the prose. Because it's written about stoic characters, I like reading books that make you cry but don't try to make you cry. So, I'm going to use an example of Frederick Backman's The Man Called Ove. A Man Called Ove, I don't know how to pronounce it. That book I didn't like because it's written trying to make you cry. It is written about a bad character, a bad person, where you know something terrible is going to happen, and it is just, it punches you in the gut, and then continues to kick you while you're down and be like, you're going to cry, ain't you, you bitch? And it's like it's spitting in your face. It's like getting beaten up by a gang. You've just been jumped by Frederick Backman, and he's not going to let up until you've let out all the tears you have. I hate that. Nothing aggravates me more. I do not want to pick a book up where someone has organised something to make you cry. Whereas in this, it's writing about something that's dreadfully sad and situations that are sad in a distanced way. I find incredibly moving and incredibly heartfelt, and I connect to that so much because I have grown up around people that do that. I've grown up with the idea of I am incredibly emotional compared to all the other men that I have grown up around. Like my brother and my dad are also incredibly emotional and will have large discussions, but in terms of the large society, it's very much ball it up, keep it down. There was just something so connected and so beautiful about how this is written, and every single chapter ended with a gut punch, but it was an earned gut punch. There's a part where, it's 20 pages in, so I do not believe this is a spoiler, especially with the idea of these suffering, crippling headaches. faced with losing everything. So Panenka finds out that he's ill because of these headaches, and he is worried about that after how he's treated his daughter and he's finally got things back on track, that he's going to crush his family again. He's going to destroy it. And it just ends with the line, he had thought his days of hurting those he loved were behind him, but when had he ever been able to promise that? And there's just something about it where Panenka is an inherently endearing and you want to care for him. And there's something about that where you're just seeing a man try to do his best now. He's made mistakes before and he's trying to make up for it. And he is a loving person. He does care about his family. And it's not his fault. It's not his fault at all what happens there. And I just felt so bad for viewing him and seeing the way that he judged himself. And he's judging himself based on something that happened 25 years ago. And that those mistakes do stick around. Someone can do something and it will change who you are and how you view the world and how you act for the rest of your life. And people get trapped in that. And that is how addiction happens. That is how all of these bad things come around. And I just thought it was brilliant. I'm going to stop talking about it. Panenka, if you can get it, because it is... I think in the UK, you can definitely get it in the UK. I don't know how available it is elsewhere. I know that Grace was having trouble in Canada when I recommended it. So be aware, but if you can, even if it's like his other book, because if people say that Leonard and Hungry Paul, which is Hession's other book, is even better, then I would 100% recommend that as well, without even reading it. Then we've got Human Acts by Han Kang. I read The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and thought it was extremely interesting. The prose was absolutely gorgeous. However, the overall plot didn't quite work with me with the themes that I thought were going on. They weren't the ones that I wanted to be taken forward. Nevertheless, I loved the prose so much that when I heard the description of Human Acts, I was like, I'm definitely going to read this. Because this is about a student uprising in South Korea during 1980 that actually happened. It's brutally put down, and this book shows it. This book graphically, from start to finish, describes deaths, and not only deaths, but the treatment of bodies afterwards, the treatment of people afterwards, how something that is never acknowledged, never dealt with, festers and grows in people and changes who they are again. It is trauma defining who someone is. Trauma clawing into a human and never letting go. And this is a national level trauma. This is a whole people that are suffering and all shared the same suffering. And it's terrible. And this is about this uprising that even now is still argued over, about the fact whether they are lying about the figures of those who died, whether more people died than they thought, whether all kinds of horrific bits. And this is translated by Deborah Smith, who does all of Han Kang's books. And I'm going to read out one section, which is where the plot follows a bunch of interconnecting characters as they go through. And this one is from a boy who is trying to find his friend's corpse, and in the process has found someone that he thinks could be his friend's sister. And so there's the idea that there are so many bodies that they're having to push them closer together, they're having to crowd them up. They're no longer in a morgue, they are now moved into other places, and there are so many dead that they're having to just push them all together as close as possible. The other important thing to discuss before going into this is that this book is in first, second, and third person. It's fucking insane. The reason I gave this 4 stars is because whilst the plot is fantastic, the characters, the absolute devastating writing is truly devastating. And whilst I cannot deny that the writing is incredible and the way that the tense and the prose and the perspective is played with is vital in a lot of ways, it is tricky to get your head around. And So this section is in second person. You are the boy trying to find his friend who has just found someone that he thinks is his friend's sister. And so it's you force yourself to focus on the person in the corner. The moment you first set eyes on them in the corner of the provincial office, you thought, young me. Though the face hadn't yet begun to putrefy, the deep knife wounds that marked it made the features difficult to discern, but it seemed similar somehow. And that pleated skirt, yes, it was definitely similar. But that kind of skirt's quite common, isn't it? Are you really sure you saw her go out in a skirt like that on Sunday? Was her hair really as short as that? That bob looks like it belongs to a proper middle schooler, doesn't it? And why would young me, constantly having to scrimp and save to make ends meet, have been so extravagant as to get a pedicure when it wasn't even summer? But you never did get a good look at her bare feet. Only young Di would know if young me had that dark blue splotch on her knee, barely the size of a red bean. You need young Di to be able to know categorically that the woman lying there is not his sister. On the other hand, though, you need young me to help you find her brother. If she was here in your place, she would have gone around every hospital in the city until she came across her brother in one of the recovery moves, just that minute at coming to his senses. I read that poorly. I'm going to apologise, but my throat is getting sore and I don't really want to reread it. But I thought that was early on harrowing, seeing someone and not knowing who they are. This is someone that you've seen, you know who they are, and their face is so slashed to pieces that you cannot tell who they are. And you're having to put together clues of body parts that you don't pay attention to. You don't know the person well enough. You don't pay attention to these things. But when their face is marred and they are no longer recognisable, you're having to put together vague memories and recollections, and you'll never have that comfort. And it is terrifying and sad, and I just thought that was early on really impactful and sets the tone for what's coming. And it doesn't let up. It gets worse and worse, and it was very difficult to read. But I would recommend it. I thought it was better than The Vegetarian, and I do plan on reading more Hank Aaron. Then I'm going to do something real naughty, which is I read Jade War. However, I have just finished Jade Legacy, and I feel like Jade Legacy has overextended itself so much. It was so perfect that I now can't talk about Jade War properly. Apart from that, the Greenbone Saga is an incredible series that I would recommend to everyone. It's up there with Ship of Death, like the Live Ship Traders series. On a personal level, I prefer the Live Ship Traders trilogy. However, I can see a lot of people putting Greenbone Saga as one of their favourite series ever. The last book was impeccable. So the second book has some of the best moments in the series. It's still a fantastic book. I gave it like a 4.5 stars. Would recommend, but I'm not going to talk about it in depth. And then finally, another one I'm not going to talk about in depth is Sharp Ends by Joe Abercrombie. I finished the standalone books. This is a short story collection. I'm going to have a conversation with Leanna from Leanna's Library and Bethany from Beautifully Bookish Bethany on their Chapter 3 podcast channel. And this did very innovative things with the short story format. I was worried going into it. I thought that it was going to be a waste of time, boring, or just kind of... I was like, I don't care about what normally is a short story when it's in a larger world, which is reading about prequel things that I don't care about. Instead, this introduced new characters. There's a running series of characters throughout this that really, they're new characters and they really bring the whole thing to life and map it together and make it a worthwhile read, in my opinion, because one of the characters is one of the best First Law characters I've read. Havre, I don't know how to pronounce it, Javre, Havre is how I pronounced it. She was fantastic, loved her. We get some sapphic stuff in this book, which introducing that to First Law is always cool. I love everything Abercrombie does, but I'm going to talk about it more. It's going to be a full video, so when that comes out, I'll link it. That is everything I read in June. It was a fucking lot. I'm going to have to cut that out of this video because I imagine it's very long and I've been rambling. Nevertheless, love you all very much. I appreciate you watching if you have made it all this way. If you didn't make it this far, I still appreciate you, even though you're not hearing me say it. If you did please do subscribe. My voice is going, as you can hear, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.